Welcome, everyone. Today is the Anti-cast. Really, I'm going to be covering highlights from the course that we've got planned for next week. So next week is the foundational application security training course. There's going to be a lot of things that we're going to cover. It's going to get through a lot of design, security by design principles. It's going to go through OWASP top 10. There's a few things. It'll get into pen testing towards the end of it, things to look for, things to be aware of. This right here is really just going to pull out a lot of the high level topics and a few of the fun pieces in the form of XKCD comics. So real quick, a little bit about me. Bill McCauley. I've been with Secure Ideas for 6 years, going into my 7th here soon. So it's been a little bit doing this work. Prior to this, I was, oh man, this was 20 plus years ago, doing electronics, avionics for Air Force. So I did radios, radars, electronics, things like that. Ended up lots of deployments. After about 6 years or so, actually 4 years into that, I went into IT field. And then after that, I separated, ended up working back on the same base, except as a contractor. So had a stint in DoD contracting, which, if you ever want to talk, that is interesting in and of itself. But I did healthcare IT during that time, also taught some classes for the on-base college there, mainly because they needed people and I was available and doing the work. One of the questions they had asked me was, well, if you don't have your bachelor's, how are you going to teach someone who's got their doctorates? The answer really is pretty simple, that I was doing that on a daily basis anyway, because you have doctors, right? If you're in IT, especially in healthcare, you're dealing with people who probably have a PhD in whatever medical area that they've specialized in. And well, they may be brilliant in that area, but have trouble right-clicking on a mouse. So yeah, you talk to the people who have the knowledge in the area. And so based on that answer, they're like, sure, go for it. And so that spent some time to it, which is where I got familiar with teaching in general. I really enjoy teaching, but mainly not for the purpose of lecture, but for the purpose of passing on information. Help do this, help do that, learn how to do this, learn how to do that, those types of things, which is where all of this tends to lead. And so yeah, I spent a lot of time in various roles doing that kind of thing. I spent some time doing compliance. So I left that, did compliance work for energy. I found really quick, though, that I was not built for compliance. I spent probably about 2.5 years there, did a good job, which I was talking about mind maps earlier, did a lot of mind mapping between version 3, version 5 of the NERC energy regulation. Yeah, I see some emojis going, yep. So compliance was good. Surprisingly, because I do pen testing now, surprisingly, a lot of the things that I learned during that 2.5 years, I use on a fairly regular basis for this, because you're dealing with compliance, you're dealing with regulatory bodies, you're dealing with, here's the standard, right? If you're looking at CIS controls, you've got benchmarks for X, Y, and Z, whatever you're trying to secure or implement for whatever reason. And so surprisingly, I learned a lot that is still useful years later doing this type of work. So, but yeah, I went through a lot of those types of positions until finally Kevin says, hey, why don't you come work at Secure Ideas? And so here I am, talking about foundational application security training. So a lot of this, we're going to get into the goals of this class. Ultimately, the goals of this class, we're going to cover some of the basic application security concepts. We're not going to get into a lot. We were talking about demos earlier. We're not going to get into a lot of demos. We are going to intend to have some discussion. There's a lot of material to get through. It's for the second half of the day, next Tuesday. I believe that is April 16th. So application security, we're going to get into security by design, the principles of, because here's what happens. In most cases, you've got something that is developed, something that is built, something that is ready to be implemented. And then as a last minute, oh, maybe we should add security into this, security gets tacked on at the end or bolted on at some other point. Whereas if you start looking into this, if you start trying to implement security at each of these early stages during the production, during the design, during the building of the application, then it's going to be a whole lot easier to first implement. Second, you're not going to have gaps, because the moment you start trying to bolt things on after the fact is when you start thinking, well, we didn't consider situation A, we didn't consider situation B, C, D, whatever they happen to be. And so we're going to spend some time talking about security by design principles. After that, this is where the OWASP top 10, we're going to use that as essentially our guideline going through the bulk of the information. What are the security vulnerabilities? What do they look like? What kind of things you need to look for in an application, what they mean, and then what the general fix is for those. Now, specifics will vary time to time to time. It always does. But that will be the idea. We're going to look at the vulnerabilities and what the underlying cause is, not the specific. Because if you start getting to the specifics, there's going to be so many specifics based on this app does this does this. You're dealing with SQL, you're dealing with whatever it may be specifically, but look at it as a holistic overview of the entire environment. What is the core problem that we're trying to solve? Because if you're just patching the symptom, right? If you're just patching the one thing, it's going to pop up someplace else, right? It's going to go. You're going to miss things. But if you're looking at this as an overarching, okay, we need to sanitize our input, you're going to look at that from a principle of across the board. We need to look at, are we sanitizing any type of user input? Do we trust anything the user gives us? The answer should be no. But right, what are we doing with this? How are we handling that? If you do that up front, you're going to have much better coverage than if you try to bolt that on afterwards. Okay, and then penetration tests. Let's see, I'm seeing some comments run through the page over here. He can. So what to expect from a professional pen test? We'll look at those, some considerations. I've been doing this for years for pen testing. More than happy to answer all kinds of questions that you may have, whether it's getting into the field, whether it's what are the key concerns, whether it's, whatever it may be related to that. Feel free to answer, or feel free to ask whatever questions. Happy to answer those. Okay. So for today, we're going to start with people trust the web with everything. And really this slide is just to reinforce that everything we do is online. Everything. There is some sort of social component, whether it's through internet, through social media, whether it's through whatever apps are on our phones that we've given access to who knows what. All the things that we trust with our data, with our information, with our data, with anything. And so a lot of these things can be very, very sensitive. And as consumers, if we're not aware of what these are doing, we are just blindly handing out that information, right? Somebody put a note, people trust their cell phones with everything. Absolutely true. People trust it with everything, and they really shouldn't. You have no idea, in most cases, who has access to that data. And anything you post, anything you put, anything you upload, anything you give it access to on your phone, somebody somewhere, if that application has access to it, they're going to be able to read that information and use it. And the bottom line is, if you've granted permission, what recourse do you have if they use it inappropriately? Right? There's a few things, and once it's out there, you're not gonna get it back. That old saying that once something is on the internet, it's out there forever. Somebody somewhere will probably have it. And so when we're looking at organizations, though, each organization, like each company, should have some sort of financial responsibility, right? Some sort of due diligence to secure that information that they're being entrusted with. We've seen too many times, whether it's from a breach or just EULAs are dens of treachery. I'm going to use that. That is fantastic. Somebody put it in the comments. The end user license agreements, dens of treachery. Yeah, because basically they're offloading all responsibility to you, the consumer, when they're the ones technically should be taking care of your information. So be aware. One of the things we're going to cover is just be aware. Be aware of what's out there. Be aware of what it's trusting. This is one of those places where I highly encourage minimalistic. Be minimal with whatever you submit online. All right. And what course would be complete without some information about the CISP? Oh, yeah. Or your CIA triad. I'm looking at comments off to the side. So if you see me pause for a second, that's why. I'm catching up on what the chat scene is looking like. You don't have to answer. So what we're going to cover some of the CIA triad. Again, this is going to be some foundational things where these are essentially your core pillars of security. Most organizations are going to lean really heavily on 2 out of 3 of these. They may be dealing with confidentiality, integrity, but availability may not be quite so important, or they're dealing with integrity and availability, not so concerned about confidentiality. It really depends on the organization and what their core functions are. So going to have some information here about CISP. If you're dealing with confidentiality, in a nutshell, you're dealing with probably the most intuitive part of security here. And this is really about keeping that data safe so that only people who are allowed to see it can see it. If you're dealing with integrity, okay, now you're trying to protect this data from some sort of unauthorized modification, some sort of unauthorized use. You got to make sure that only people who can alter it, change it, are allowed to do so. And availability, you want this available. 911 is a great example of this. In most cases, availability is one of the biggest pieces of this. Is we need to be available. We need to have someone who can pick up that phone, right, to make it there, to make sure that that support or that system that is available when needed, especially during emergencies. But this also brings up the concept of non-repudiation. And if you're not familiar with non-repudiation, really this is a legal concept that has been incorporated into security, where you've got the proof of origin, right? You've got essentially that a person cannot deny that their account has taken a certain action. Now, it may not be the person who did the action, but you have some sort of logging, some sort of way to determine that this account performed whatever sensitive action was taking place. Shared admin accounts, shared user accounts, shared admin accounts for non-repudiation. This is one of those things that will break non-repudiation, because if you've got 10 people using the same account, you have no way to determine who used it when for what action. So if you've got an admin and someone, synced the DC off to a place where, they shouldn't have, all you know is that the account did it. You have no idea that who was using this shared account, right? You have no idea which of those 10 people, or if it was compromised and someone else had did those actions with that account. So non-repudiation becomes a big deal especially when you get to the legal side of this. That's a different topic though. Anyway, it's like, but hey, I know that guy. Nice. So let's see. We're also going to cover some of the identity access management controls, security controls, different types of security controls. Oh, multi-factor authentication, things that will apply to that. And there's a whole section we're going to dedicate to this piece of it. But moving on for now, we're going to look at some security design principles. I mentioned this earlier. This is where we're going to have secure defaults. What does it mean to fail securely? What does it mean to fail safely? Different services, what kind of data validation is available, different duties being split into different tasks. What do those look like and why are they important? And the fact that if you apply these things during the development side of an application, then you're going to have a whole lot fewer problems. I don't know if that sounded, yeah, you're going to have a lot fewer problems because it's being built into the application as a whole. So minimizing your attack surface, secure defaults, least privilege. We're going to look at a few of these because hold on just a minute here. We're going to get into, there we go, least privilege. I figure since the last slide had it, we're going to start with an XKCD here. Because every program, every privilege user on the system should be operating using the least amount of privilege necessary. Here's a good example of this. I mentioned earlier that I was working with healthcare IT. When I first jumped into that field, one of the things that I noticed was because of we were on base, it was a military clinic. I was contracting at the time, so I had separated. Now I was contracting. But the way it would work is you would have people in family medicine, you would have people in optometry, dental, radiology, immunizations, wherever. Like all of these different areas were contained within this one small section. And we found that especially because of the way military would shift people around, it's based on the needs. So just because someone started as an optometry tech doesn't mean they're not going to go do work in radiology, for example. And so as people would shift, and this shift would be 2 months, 6 months, once a year, completely varied. And so what would happen is they would take the permissions from where they were at initially, get moved to this other position, and now they have to get permissions added to them, but we couldn't take them away. We couldn't remove the original permissions. We couldn't change those because how many times do they have to go back, right? How many times do they have to help the other person who took over their position, said, oh, I know where this is at. Let me get you squared away. They have to have access to do that. At least that was the justification for it. And so we found that there was a compiling, and you've got people who almost have administrative rights because they had shifted to 5, 6, 7 different locations in the clinic. And so, yeah, they were absolutely breaking this principle of least privilege, because really they should only have the least amount of permissions to do their job. And if they've moved from another place, then those other permissions should have been removed, and then the whole new set of permissions would have been applied. So I love the XKCD here, because how many times can you just say, hey, make me a sandwich, make it yourself, sudo, make me a sandwich, or sudo. Who says it's sudo? Who says it's sudo? Because I've always done sudo. Switch user and do, but some people say sudo. I'm actually curious who does which sudo. Thank you. Somebody else agrees. Nice. Somebody says that they have a shirt with this one. This was great. Yeah, just being able to just adding that in there, and then the application is going to do it. Another one of the, I say sudo. Yeah, I've heard both from both sides. Sudo, all over the place. So now I just type it out. So, okay, principle defense in depth. Defense in depth. Castle approach. So most of you are probably familiar with this piece of it, that this is layers. And really the idea here is that you're not basing your entire security on a single layer, that someone would realistically, from a practical point of view, have to get through multiple layers to get to whatever was sensitive, whether it's a process, whether it's data, whether it's an application, whatever it happens to be, multiple layers to get through. The reason that that's important is because for every layer that you have to go through, there should be a greater chance that they're going to be detected. And if you have to get through multiple layers, this is typically multiple technologies, is what that usually equates to. So having the knowledge to get through one layer may mean that you can get through 1 or 2 just fine, but you may not be able to get through 3, 4, and 5. And so having these multiple gates, having these multiple layers, it's like the castle. You've got the terrain, you've got the moat, you've got the wall, right? You've got all these different barriers you have to get through in order to get to the keys to the castle, the center of the defensive location. And this is important for a couple of reasons. No control is ever 100% effective. How many times have we heard that I've got a WAF? Great. That's one control. WAFs have been bypassed before. They can be again. And if there's ever a glitch, if there's ever a vulnerability, if there's ever a misconfiguration, because misconfiguration is actually one of those things that we're going to spend a decent amount of time on, because a lot of these applications, a lot of these controls that we have, is the configuration that makes all the difference. This is why we have CIS benchmarks, right? This is why we have the CIS controls for a lot of these different applications, whether it's O365, whether it's Azure, whether it's whatever it is. We have those there to say, okay, you can configure it to make it work, but we also want to take security into consideration when we're doing this. So no control is ever 100% effective. They are regularly circumvented, which is why it's important to have multiple layers. One of the another area that we'll talk with. I love the Austin Powers clip. That's great. When we're fixing security issues, we're going to cover this as well. How well something works before I decide to try and fix it versus after I decide to fix it. And if you take a second and look through this, initially it works great, has minor problems. Oh, we have to start trying to fix this. And so you've got a chain of events here. By the end of this, you're watching YouTube tutorials, take a deep breath, you're cutting the actual physical wires. At some point, it's never going to work again. So what you want to look at is when you start trying to fix something, let's make sure we're A, fixing it correctly, and B, let's make sure that we're fixing the correct problem. Has minor problems, it just needed cleaning. Great. So if you're looking at this, I love the last one here, where you turn to your other possessions and say, let that be a lesson to you. Let's see, someone had a question. Security is supposed to be expensive. So, yeah, that's exactly right. Love this graph. Absolutely. So yeah, we want to look at fixing security problems, but we want to look at fixing the right problem the right way. Okay, so this is where we're actually going to spend a lot of time with OWASP, these next two slides. That's really going to be the bulk of next week. So we want to define security requirements, right? We want to enforce controls. We want to go through and be able to handle. These are all things that you want to look at in the development side of things. What are your authentication, and authorization verification requirements, right? You want to have those requirements as you're developing. You want to know what libraries, frameworks you can use. You want to make sure the trusted sources, you want to make sure that whatever resources, whatever frameworks or libraries you're depending on are actively maintained. Secure queries, you want a configuration, authentication. I love the chain of conversation here. Thank you. Let's see. Output encoding, all inputs should be sanitized, right? These are things you want to take into the development phase. Access controls, whether you've got DAC groups, MAC clearance, role-based access controls, RBAC. If there's data classifications, in fact, there should be some sort of data classification for whatever data that this is taken care of, whatever data is being used in this. If it's all public, if it's all non-sensitive, great. But that still needs to be a consideration, because whatever classification, whatever level of security needs to be applied to whatever data this houses, that level of security needs to be applied to all the correct locations. And if there's variations, whether you've got confidential, top secret, whatever those need to be, then those delineations, right, those barriers need to be enforced and respected throughout the application. So we'll spend some time going through the proactive controls, being proactive about the security that you're building into the application that's being developed. Followed by OWASP Top 10, broken access controls. This is really meant to draw attention to prevalent issues. If you've looked at the OWASP Top 10, if you're familiar with them, Really, this is going to draw attention to what are some of the prevalent issues, what are some of the most common things that application security runs into. Access controls, cryptographic injection. One of the ones that I see probably more often than anything else is a security misconfiguration. Because at some place, this is good, the control itself is fine, it was misconfigured, which is why you have an exposure of whatever data it happens to be. Let's see, we're about 25 minutes into this. Slides. Yep, we're about halfway through. We're doing good. We're doing good. 2017, 2021, this probably doesn't need to be in here. It just goes through and mentions that from 2017, there were a few of these that have been reordered. And I believe, let's see, it's 2021. They do this every 3 to 4 years-ish in general. So I would think we're probably due for another one here soon. So I would expect this to change probably the next year or so. As far as, and they've got them listed in what are the things I see most often. Access control, dealing with most common and most impactful, which is where we get into our rating systems. So exploitability, they're going to check for exploitability. They're going to say, where does it fit on the weakness and how prevalent is it? How detectable is it? And then what are the actual impacts? Now, there's 2 sections for the rating that OWASP doesn't take into consideration for this. So threat agents, business impacts, those are really going to be business specific. And so they're not really rating that section of it. So this right here will give for the vulnerability, its exploitability, those types of aspects. The Lone Ranger, love it. So those types of aspects, but your threat agents, depending on what business sector you're in or the business impacts, again, depending on your organization, those are things that are going to be handled by the organization specifically. So we'll go a little bit over the risk rating because when we start looking at these, each one of these is going to have a different rating associated, and just understanding what that rating scale means helps you to understand where to place it. Haha, more comics. This is the way to go. Access control. I pulled this out of the access control section. You're going to have Facebook, you're going to have Gmail, you're going to have the user account on my laptop, which is, right, my account. And then you're going to have a tier. So if you've ever had the chance to attend Eric Keene's Red Teaming Fundamentals for Active Directory, absolutely phenomenal class. We were at B-Sides OK last week and we taught that class. Phenomenal. He is amazing. Anything comes to Active Directory. And one of the things that he constantly brings up, is the tiering and compartmentalization. And this is funny because as a user account, I've got my information, I've got Facebook, I've got Gmail, I've got my banking information. If they have my account on my laptop and I'm logged in and they get it, they have all of my stuff. But if they don't have admin rights, there's limitations on what they can do to your company, to your organization, because ultimately we have work because our company is in business and is productive. And so if the organizational IT, organizational InfoSec groups look at this, say, you know, we have to prioritize the business impact of this over the user impact. Yes, it would be horrible if someone got my account, got my stuff. I would have to deal with that as an individual, but the organization still stays afloat. Whereas if someone gets domain admin or administrator rights in the domain, that affects the entire organization, including my job. So I love this comic. They can't they can impersonate me, but at least they can't install drivers without my permission. Hilarious, love it. But one of the things that we're going to discuss is why is the access control so important from an organizational standpoint? Go ahead. Daily driver account. When in doubt, C4. I love these comics. Yeah, keep these going. Okay. One of the sections we dealt with is injection, because one of the OWASP top 10 is going to deal with injection flaws. This right here is something that Nathan had come up with, and I love this because you've got a drone delivery system. Okay, we've got with 2020, 2021 rolling it through, a lot of things are now you order online, you go pick it up, or drop off, delivery, DoorDash, whatever it happens to be. Consider if we had a drone delivery system for this, where the actual instructions are get the package, read whatever the label is, deliver the package, return home, go back to step one, right? Simple logical loop. But if we are able to inject, or if we're able to break out of the context that's given to us, we could say, oh, instead of, just deliver the package, return home, we can say deliver the package, go home, get another package, deliver the package, go home, get another package, deliver the package, go home, get another packet, right? Loop it like this, and suddenly you end up with this massive amount of shopping carts. So the idea when it comes to injection is sanitization, and can we break out of whatever the existing context happens to be? So if we're able to inject these instructions after the label address is read, then we can cause the behavior to do something that we want rather than what it's intended to do. All right. Yeah, got lots of shopping carts now show up. And SQL injection. Has anyone seen this one before? Just out of curiosity. I'm betting on 100%, but maybe 95. We got lots of thumbs up showing up in the Discord. Little Bobby tables. Yep. Jar, I like the XKCD comics too. Somebody had mentioned that's my email. I love it. We've lost this year's student records. I hope you're happy. Sanitize inputs, please. Please, please, please. All right, unit testing. So one of the final things that we'll start to work with here, I think I've got about another 5 minutes or so. But testing should be done ideally. I should say, depending on what model you're using. If you're using a waterfall, this is going to be down at the very end of the process. It's going to take longer, but there's a lot more back and forth on the individual section to section, as in it doesn't move from section A to section B until all of the requirements are worked out. Whereas Agile, you're going to have a lot more 1 week, 2 week sprints to try to get a piece of functionality put together. But testing can be done, unit testing, integration testing, whether all the way through the actual implementation. So we're going to look at the different types of testing that is done at each of these stages and when it makes sense to do which one. Has anyone heard of monitoring and alerting? Wait, what's the password? Wait, which password? Let me go back. Oh, for the Bobby tables? Yes. So monitoring and alerting. I can't tell you the number of times that we've seen alerts, or I should say notifications on the screen that will say something along the lines of, hey, this is going to be, this is recorded, this activity is monitored, only use this if you're an authorized user, and so on. Talking with point of contacts at clients, it's rare that we find people who actually notice those types of alerts. And so this is why this one is funny to me. Trying to get into the switch user by Rob M using his account to see if he can elevate his privileges, wondering where these incidents actually get reported to. This incident will be reported. Somebody somewhere will get them. Whether they're looking at them is a whole different story. So, and actually, for this to be effective, for those alerts to actually be effective, somebody actually has to be looking at them on a regular basis. Because if you don't know what your normal baseline is, you're not going, you have no way of knowing when something is abnormal, right? You have no idea of determining when something is stepping outside of what those normal bounds are. Yeah, we got a lot of comics in this one. Oh, here we go. MS-DOS. So for this one, this is actually getting into the pen test side of things. And when we get into pen testing, we do scoping for what is the application, what is the technology, what is the network environment, what are the things that we need to know. And in a lot of cases, we have legacy equipment, legacy systems, legacy whatever that has been installed someplace. I love you. They do. The comic keep me engaged because this is how I think. I think in memes. I think in comic form. So yeah, I enjoy this as well. But when we're dealing with the technologies, a lot of times we're going to find a lot of legacy equipment, a lot of legacy whatever. The interesting thing about this one is we still use gunpowder for fireworks, even though we've had nuclear weapons for 70 years. So is it possible? My very first thought was, is it possible to have nuclear fireworks? Safe nuclear fireworks. Is that even possible? I'm thinking, because that would be a blast. I don't know. I have to give that some thought. I haven't seen this one in a while. But when we're looking at technologies, too many times we're going to have things that are legacy and outdated. And right, every organization, that's so someone put a giant explosion in the chat section there. That's a pretty big firework. I'm thinking safer, a little bit smaller impact, something I can use in the backyard and not have radiation poisoning or something. The balance here is whether it's through cost, whether it's through, good example, when I was doing the compliance, we were working for an energy industry, and because of the SCADA systems, right, because of the environments we worked with the stations and substations, there were a lot of those pieces of equipment that did not have, they were incapable of some of the more modern technologies, some of the more modern controls that we could apply. And when we were looking at protecting those things, the regulatory body actually had to make a rule that said, okay, we realize that some of the, take password complexity, for example, some of these pieces of equipment are incapable of the password complexity that we would require on most modern systems. We recognize that, we understand that. Therefore, we want you to secure it to the level that is technically possible, the maximum amount possible for what the device can do. So if the device only has upper and lower, but allows for 32 characters, you better have a 32 character password that is upper and lower, right? Do it to the maximum extent you can when you're not able to meet the full password complexity, just as a simple example. Pull the plug on it. Exactly. But yeah, so whether it's due to cost, whether it's due to the sector that you're working in, whether it's due to, right, a whole number of things, there are reasons why we may run into legacy equipment. Realistically, we want to get those upgraded as quickly as we can. At the same time, there may be core business functions that rely on a specific server. Start looking for solutions. Start looking for those solutions now, so that when it comes time to decommission whatever piece of equipment that is, right, you're working in the right direction for it. So we run into this a lot when we're testing. We all different types of tests that we'll do for white box, gray box, black box. If you're interested, we're going to go into a lot more detail when we get to the class itself, so that if you've got questions on any of these, you've got questions about what type of testing, let us know. We're happy to share that information. everything from different types of testing, source code, all the way down to in fact, I've got a test this week where I have virtually nothing except access to the environment. That's it. So my job is to go through and find out, how far can I get? What can I do? Can I get credentials? Can I get whatever? And then how far can I get with that information? So that is a very quick, very high level overview of the foundational security class that we will be doing next Tuesday. So questions, comments, concerns? I think I'm just about done with at least the presentation side of this. Yeah. Throw some emojis in there too. Did the backstage team have questions?
We are back.
Back.
Bill, you did great. Well
Yes.
done.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
calm and collected and knowledgeable.
If anybody has any questions, now would be a perfect time to ask them.
I should
Oh, we got one.
Oh, wait, here we go. Is pen testing SCADA systems similar to pen testing PCs or IP-based systems?
If by similar, I should say, how similar are we talking about? Because the basic process is going to be the same for everything, right? You're going to look for vulnerabilities. You have to know the environment you're looking at. You're looking for anomalies. You're looking for ways to take normal usage and abuse that usage, normal functionality and abuse that functionality. So on one hand, yes, they're the same. On another hand, it's going to be very different from system to system, but the basic principles will be the same. Largely the same.
And Amanda asked if your registration ended, and I sent you the link to that. Let's see. Yes, there is still time. I'll post in the Discord channel. Well, I guess I can post in Zoom too. The link for your class next week.
That will work.
Yes. To get into pen testing with no production-based skills, how do you get around this hurdle, and how do you continue to skill up?
How do you get into pen testing without production skills? Did I
With
hear that
no
right?
production-based skills.
So, okay. Here's my 2 cents when it comes to testing in general. The thought process, the ability to think through things critically and creatively, right? Those 2 pieces are extremely important when it comes to pen testing. The technical skills can be learned. In most cases, you can learn X, Y, and Z. In most cases, you can learn tool A, B, C, right? You can learn the tools and you can learn the steps. Thinking critically and understanding what you're looking at is typically far more important, at least in my perspective, or when I think of it from my perspective.
Even if we're not doing labs on the class, are you commenting on common labs we could access, Juicebox, HackerRank, etc.?
Those are good examples, yes. We're not going to actually be doing the hands-on for this. This is actually a bit more foundational. So yes, we will reference them. No, we're not going to actually be digging into them.
Okay, I have a
Does that help?
two-parter here.
Okay.
Do you have recommendation for a good DAST tool that can handle both APIs and apps? I'm thinking of evaluating StackHawk.
That's not one that I've worked with. I don't have any that come off for the top of my head. First answer. Second answer is, when it comes to recommendations, I'm hesitant to recommend officially. But I can check and get back to you on that one.
Okay, second question. Between SCA, SAST, DAST, how would you choose to implement them in terms of priority? All of them are important, but if you're limited on budget and time.
So SCA, SAST, and DAST, right?
Yes. How would you choose to implement them in terms of priority? Did I say policy? I meant priority.
Priority.
Yes.
And make sure that I've got the SCA correct. SCA
Yes.
is,
Oh, I'm not sure. What is SCA?
because I
Oh,
come
wait,
from the
he
I
said
come from a military background.
software, software composition analysis.
Got it. I was going to say I come from a military background and everything is
Yes.
acronyms, and the same acronyms can sometimes mean different things. Okay. So SAS and DAS can usually be built in, and you're going to want that during development. The SCA, that's a good question for prioritization. So here's my thought when it comes to anything priority related. Look at what the core business functions are. What is the core service? What is the core functionality that your business needs to operate? Two, those are the things you want to start with. So start with those. What is core? And I'm thinking here. I lean towards, yeah, SAS and DAS, I would say start with, because you're building those into your development. The software, hold on, software what? Software composition analysis.
Yes. So, yeah.
I lean towards that being afterwards. See, that's one of those where from organization, you're going to have to take care, you're going to have to look into your budget, and you're going to have to look into what are the operational requirements that you have. And that's going to be a cost benefit analysis, usually by your execs. If you're looking from a technical perspective, SAS and DAS are usually built into a lot of different tools, and so you can use those pretty easily. I don't know what the cost would be for a SCA, for a software composition analysis. That one I actually don't know about. I don't have a lot of experience with that one. But Mick,
does your course talk about DevOps?
It does, but it deals with it from a design perspective. What are the principles for design that you want to build into your development phases?
When performing app testing, is it better to perform dynamic testing or static testing?
Both are important. Static is going to catch, did I code this correctly? Whereas dynamic is going to be more of the business logic side of things. How are things being interacted with by the user? So in fact, when we do pen testing, the DAST is what we're using most, but we do look at some of the static analysis tools. MobSF, if we're dealing with something like mobile, would be a great, static tool for that type of test.
There's a question in Discord. In an agile development environment where features are changing rapidly, what is the best place to do threat modeling and secure by design?
Run that by me one more time.
In an agile development environment where the features are changing rapidly, what is the best time to do threat modeling and secure by design? So like, what's the best time to do that?
There's going to be multiple areas where this is going to be. So testing in the agile section, right? There's going to be different areas. And each time you go around to each of those sections, you're going to be taking that response, taking that feedback, taking those results, feeding them back into your risk analysis. And you're going to be reevaluating it each time. At which stage is most important? I don't know if there's a specific stage that would be most important to do that, because you're going to end up doing this throughout each of those stages at some point in time.
Gotcha.
If that makes sense. I've got in my head, I've got the different sections around, and on multiple of those pieces, that information gets fed back into your risk and analysis. And that risk and analysis is going to feed your next sprint, right? Your next section of testing and what the focus is on those.
On slides showing legacy application, what would be the advantage of using current apps? Is the main argument that vulnerabilities and legacy apps would be publicized?
So that's There's a couple reasons for that. There have been some cases where you've got a legacy application, and because it's not using any current type of technologies, it's not vulnerable to an attack. Not because not because something couldn't be done to it, but because it doesn't have the underlying technology that the attack would use to get into the system. So if you're looking at what piece is or what are the reasons for doing more current technologies, it would be because you've got more controls, you've got higher encryption, you've got more security options available to you. There are some things that work well as legacy, and it's going to be a case by case on a lot of those. In most cases, the recommendation is to move up to a higher or a more current option because of the security controls that are built into it now versus not, I guess is the way to put that.
I think this is about your class. Are you going to cover any hands-on in your class? Or you had said before it's mainly foundational, but will anything be covered hands-on in your class next week?
Not for testing, not for this. That would be more of the P's course that Jennifer would be doing later on.
Okay, and I'll post a link to that in a minute.
Yep, she's actually going to take the fundamentals from this, the principles, and she's going to go through. It's a 3-day class, and she's going to go through the labs, the examples, all of these different areas, except they're going to go through and work through the problems. So that'll be in May sometime, I believe.
Yeah, I posted it before, but I'll post it again in a second here. What's your recommendation for image scanning and pipeline?
Image scanning and pipeline, as in
pipeline.
Oh, as far as scanning the images as it's going through your CI/CD pipeline.
I'm assuming.
That's more of Mick, because he actually deals with the development of that side of it. If you've got the capabilities to do it, then yes, you want to. If you would have to buy tools, I actually I'm undecided on which way to go with that. I lean towards yes, if you can. Let me get back on that one too. I'm making a note of it too.
Okay.
I need to follow back on.
Okay. To be a pen tester, is a bachelor degree needed? I think the answer to that's no, but
the answer is no, depending on where you're trying to go. If you're going to a larger corporation, a larger environment, sometimes they'll look at degrees, sometimes they'll look at certifications. If you're going to a smaller company, they're more concerned with what do you know? Can you critically think through an issue? And can you take a technical background and apply it in creative ways to whatever the current problem happens to be? So in most cases, I tell people that if you want to get into pen testing or a security related field in general, become the security expert where you are right now. Because if you become the person that people want to talk to about what is this vulnerability, what is it doing, why is it effective, right? Why does this thing work the way it works, and why is it actually effective? Then you'll understand better why the fix is effective, right? You'll understand if the fix actually works, if you're patching a symptom or if you're actually patching the underlying problem. Become that person who is passionate about the security and understands about it where you are right now, and that will naturally open up paths of progression, whether it's at your current place or someplace else. It'll naturally progress into a security related position.
Here's another question about your class, I think. Are we going to discuss strategies on how to prioritize fixes for vulnerabilities?
Some of them, yes.
Okay.
There's going to be some specific examples because we're working with a 4-hour time block. Then yes, we are going to go through some, but it's going to be dealing with whatever the core problem is.
Okay.
So going through the OWASP top 10, looking at authentication, authorization, going through injection-based, We want to look at, yes, what the fixes are, but fixes from not from a specific, hey, do this one piece, but more as, what are we trying to fix? What are we trying to address? What is the problem we're actually trying to solve here?
Do you have any opinions on tools for like SNYK,
For
SNCC?
do I?
Do you have any opinions?
At least I call it SNCC.
Yeah. I didn't want to try it, so I just did the letters.
You did great.
Thank
Do I have any opinions on tool? So yes, I like those in general. One that we use on a regular basis is retire.js. When we're looking for jQuery and other types of libraries, they're really, especially when we're doing web app tests, because everything's being proxied through whatever your proxy is, Zap, Burp. But having a plugin for something like retire.js allows me to, as my traffic is moving through, it's looking for those types of queries, right? It's looking for those types of libraries so that I don't have to go manually search for each and every one. So they're really useful.
Well, it looks like that's pretty much all of the questions we've got.
We got a couple more, Megan.
Oh, we did? Where? Oh, here we go. Sorry. I was looking in Discord. Let's see. Do you have any advice for transitioning military trying to get into the pen testing field? What work would you focus on to be more marketable?
A wide variety of technical things. So, for example, I did sysadministration, I did healthcare, I did compliance. That actually served me really, really well moving into this type of work, because while I may not have the depth that someone like Mick, who has been a developer for 20 some odd years, right? That's an amazing amount of depth in web applications. Mine is much more broad in the sense that while I may not have looked at one specific type of technology, I've touched so many others that I've got these points of connection, things that I can say, oh, this is similar to such and such. This is similar to something else. Oh, this behaves like something else that I'm familiar with. So it builds those connection points. If you're looking for military, same advice as before. Wherever you're at, start looking at how can you become the security person where you are. Another good example that comes to mind is firewall rules. For people who have to work with firewall rules, they put in this rule. Okay, now the question is, I've put it in, does it work? Disclaimer, never test those without permission. Never. Even if they're your company, even if you put it in, do not test those things without getting actual permission to do so. Because if you put in a rule, let's say you're dealing with your external firewall, you put in a rule to block whatever traffic, get permission, say, hey, can I check from the outside to make sure this is behaving the way I expect it to behave? Check the port, see what's open, see what you can see. Does it handle your 44380 traffic as expected? Well, what happens if I give it 20? What happens if I give it a different protocol? What happens if I give it different types of information that it's not expecting? Does it handle those things well? So that's the principle that you're working in the area that you're at to make sure that you become the person, right, who knows the security in that area. Let's see,
Well,
retired Air Force.
We've got about a minute left for this part, so we don't want to go over. So if you could sum up your talk in a minute, what are the biggest takeaways that people should have?
The biggest takeaways, I just saw a note here in chat real quick. VetSec, fantastic. So if military, I was going to mention that earlier. Thank you for the reminder. VetSec is a really good channel that you can get to in Slack. Look them up. Great for connecting military people with security jobs. For this, the basic thing is when dealing with application security, we want to take into consideration all of the security principles into the development and design phase, so that by the time you get to implementation, all of those core concerns have been addressed and you're not trying to bolt things on after the fact and end up with gaps. Because every place that you're going to have two technologies together, those barriers where something is being passed from one section to another, that is where things tend to get dropped. That's that layer where items are overlooked, that one application or one service will trust it and then just hand it over, and the other person or the other side of the equation automatically trust it without doing verification. So those technological barriers where two things join and integrate, that's where we tend to find a lot of issues, because security was bolted on after the fact and not built into the process from the very beginning.
Okay, so usually don't we stay on for extra time, but we let people go that don't have any extra questions, but do you have a few minutes to stick around and answer any more questions, Bill?
Absolutely. I wanted to
Okay.
make sure I got
Awesome.
that first question though, because I've got the imaging in the pipeline, which I'll have to look at, but there was another one that I didn't jot down in time.
I'll go over and get them for you.
Okay.
Well, thanks, everyone.
Yes, thanks for
Yeah.
coming, everybody. If you want to stick around and listen to some more Q&A, then
Also, we have our Ask Me Anything with myself and Brian. I think Megan's going to come join us too. So basically, it's our breakout session. So if you look down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see that breakout rooms right there. You can go ahead and jump in. It is open now. So we're going to go over there. We're going to talk about anything. You come on camera, come off mute and join us and ask any questions about career advice, training, really anything you want to ask the team here at Antisyphon. So Bill, thank you so much for being here today. Thanks for sticking around to answer some questions. And everyone, thanks for coming. We'll see you next week.
all right.
Anytime.
So
Do you want me to hang out here?
Yeah.
So we go so that people know that they can leave if they want.
They can leave if they want.
There was somebody that said at their organization they were recently hit by a DDoS attack. And upon further investigation, it was because of a developer had installed a vendor application, which is actually an open source and vulnerabilities in the public. How can such an instance be avoided, hopefully involving management as well?
So developers have a lot of access.
Yeah.
They have a lot of access to a lot of different things. And if there's proper checks and balances, those things are less likely to happen. Usually that happens because something was not vetted, right? Something was not validated. And there weren't good checks done prior to that being installed, being applied. You said it was another application or another tool that was included, is what I believe.
Yes,
The
it was
question included, yeah.
it was an open source. It was an open source tool.
Got it. So there's a lot of good open source projects because you have a lot of people that are looking at it. A lot of people are reporting. Check to make sure that it's security conscious, and make sure that it's got good active maintenance. You're not going to hit everything 100%. There are some really good open source projects out there, but you still have to do your due diligence, regardless of whether you're getting something off the shelf or you're getting something open source.
And I DM'd you on Discord the question from Zoom, so maybe you can answer that later on.
Let's see. I'm looking.
Hopefully I DM'd the right person. Yeah, it's you. I know it's you.
You're doing great, Megan.
Yeah.
Well done.
Let's see.
And is it under general chat? It's not under general chat.
No, I send it to you in a direct message.
I'm looking.
Did I not send it to the right? Is there more than one Bill at Secure Ideas?
Shouldn't be.
Okay.
Oh, there, it's under event.
Okay.
Is it? No, it's not.
I'll find you and get it later.
Yeah.
Do you recommend any free resources for setting up portfolio projects for beginning cybersecurity analysts just finishing school with little programming experience?
Ooh. Is there a specific reason you're looking at programming? Is that to go into, right? Those are the,
They're just looking for free resources for setting up portfolio projects. Do you have any?
well, so if they're looking to set up labs, there's a lot of tools out there that can be used to simulate. As far as a portfolio project, I'm not sure on that one. That's something I could reach out to Mick because he would have actually done more of that. If you're looking, so, and this is for a portfolio project in order to get more into the cybersecurity space.
Right, for beginning in
assuming-
for cybersecurity analysts, just kind
I
of
would
beginning.
Fine. I would say fine. I imagine there has to be a lot of options out there. Find something that you're interested in, become a part of it, become a contributor, right? Become someone who is involved with that and is submitting. That will naturally over time build, but without having the programming experience, you're going to have to look for ways to contribute, knowing that you've got work to do on the programming side of things. If that makes sense.
Let's see. Not really a lab, more like I build a simple REST API, for example, or create a file integrity model, for example.
So for I don't know one off the top of my head, no.
Okay.
But that is something I could easily ask Mick because
Okay.
he is, again, in the same way that Eric is brilliant when it comes to Active Directory, Mick is absolutely phenomenal with anything web development wise.
Well, awesome. I think that is pretty much it. They said thank you. There's lots of thank yous. So we really appreciate you coming on and spending time with us and going into overtime. We're about 7 minutes over, so we're going to go ahead and end the stream for now. We appreciate everybody coming. Join us next time. Thanks.
Thank you all very much. Let's see, I'll see if I can find you in. Where'd it go?